Roma has sacked Jose Mourinho, and I'm honestly a little confused. He wasn't on that bad of a run of form. Roma is currently ninth, but they're only like 4 or 5 points away from the top four. So it makes you think, what is Roma thinking? And then where is Jose Mourinho going to go? Because that's really the $1 million question at the moment. Hello, everyone. As always, make sure to comment down below. Let me know what you think of the news that Jose Mourinho got sacked by Roma. Where do you think Jose will go? And beyond that, if you're new to the channel, consider subscribing and like the video if you end up enjoying. I'm going to look at the most likely clubs based on the current odds. So 3-1 odds currently are Newcastle. I figure Newcastle's a good starting point because there's, there's a lot to kind of consider with the Newcastle move. Eddie Howe hasn't been necessarily a bad manager for Newcastle whatsoever. He's been fairly successful. Obviously, FFP restrictions are a thing. The squad's going through a pretty severe injury crisis as well. And now, news that Joe Linton is basically out until the end of the season, potentially due to a surgery that he'll need to do on one of, I believe, his knees. That's all news that basically puts Newcastle in a position of this season's effectively becoming a write-off. My question then becomes, is it better to take the manager on while the club is, for lack of a better term, in quotes, in tatters, lots of players injured, stars suspended like Tonali, all the works, their backs are really against the wall and they don't have really much to do. And realistically, they can't do much in the market anyways. There's rumors that Bruno Guimaraes or Isak or one of their star players might have to be sold to comply with FFP regulations. So who knows what's going to happen with Newcastle. I think it's a bit of an exciting prospect. I wouldn't necessarily say it's if I'm looking at it from the perspective of what I think is going to happen. I don't think it's my most likely route that he'll go because, quite frankly, he could go, but they got a good thing with Eddie Howe right now. I don't think Newcastle are just going to kind of toss out the window, Russian Mourinho not be able to, give him a proper backing in the transfer window due to FFP concerns. All that kind of seems like a bit of a dark road for Newcastle to go down for their own sake. I think, a manager of Mourinho's pedigree, he warrants and demands and commands proper financial backing. At Roma, he's made some magic work, but they don't spend a lot. He needs a side that's going to back him enough to be able to compete in the Premier League if he comes to the Premier League. Newcastle have the funds, but they don't have necessarily, I guess, for lack of a better phrase, in quotes, the right to go out and spend because they haven't necessarily made up that revenue. And FFP is not allowing them basically to go out and buy players. So, he'll have the squad he has, and it won't necessarily be a bad thing, but I think it will kind of mix up things a bit. If you remove Eddie Howe from there, maybe some dissent starts to rise in the locker room. Obviously, Jose Mourinho is by far and away a better manager than literally every managerial position I talk about in this video. He is a better manager than the current manager that is, at the helm for that spot. So Newcastle, I don't know. I'm giving it like a 5 out of 10 likeliness to happen. I know odds are 3-1, but like Sky Bet are giving him 25% chance of joining. I don't think it's gonna happen. It would be blockbuster. Don't get me wrong. It'd be a huge transfer. It'd really shake things up. And if he got backing, then it could be one of those moves that ends up still working out for Newcastle. The next most likely odds are any Saudi Pro League club, really. 20% chance, 4-1 odds, according to Sky Bet. I don't know. I don't think Mourinho is really at that stage in his career where he wants to go out and, basically just retire. I think he'll get there eventually just because of how big of a name he is, and there will always be a giant heap of cash waiting for him wherever, the money ends up being to manage, effectively in it exhibition league. Um, I don't think Mourinho feels satisfied with where he's at currently. Obviously, he's you know he's a manager who's won effectively everything at club level. He's managed in England, Spain, and Italy, um, and he's basically he's won the league title in all those countries. He's done great things, and at the end of the day, is he ready to hang up his boots at effectively for a manager at the tender age of 61? He could still manage for another 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 years, and I think he'll be in a good spot just because he is such a legendary manager. I'm gonna give the Saudi Pro League club rumors. I'll give him like a 3 out of 10. I don't know. It doesn't feel like it's gonna happen now. Like I feel like he will manage in Saudi eventually if Saudi continues to funnel in money. Give it, by the end of the decade, he'll probably be there, is my guess. But at the end of the day, right now, after Roma, he was just in the Europa League final last year. He was winning the Conference League the season before. So will he really be adamant to kind of leave with that kind of legacy? I think he still wants to manage at least a couple more matches in the Champions League, one would assume. So I'm going to give it a 3 out of 10 likelihood of happening for my rating. Next up at 5-1 odds, 16% implied chance of happening is the Portuguese national team. Portugal national team is chock full of talent. Cristiano Ronaldo's there, obviously. Diogo Jota, Joao Felix, Antonio Silva. The list goes on and on. I could sit here and list fantastic Portuguese talent constantly and try to provide you with a reason why it's a good move. But regardless, I think this is the best move of the three so far that I've listed. I think it has the most likelihood of happening as well. Mourinho is a manager who hasn't necessarily managed in basically any kind of international setting. He's had some opportunities here and there. It hasn't really materialized. And now, if he were to go out and for Euro 2024, he was the manager for Portugal, they're in a far, far, far better position than if Roberto Martinez is still at the wheel come, summer. So I think I would rate this maybe like an 8 out of 10 likelihood of happening. I think there's a chance, and Mourinho is the type that would take the job and figure out a way to, maybe only do it for the tournament, and then if he wins or just has the feeling, basically have like an exit clause in there or something to be able to scurry out back to club football. But the timing feels right. He's got until June-ish, so 5 months or so to prepare. What else is he gonna do? Go into some club that's unstabilized, be the scapegoat, or go into a club, well, not a club, but a national team in a setup and a structure that basically allows him to bring together some of the world's best players and have a go at one of the titles that he hasn't won yet. I think it'd be a fantastic story for him. I think he'd be far better manager. I'd love to see it happen. Likelihood of happening, I don't know. I feel like there's a smaller chance of this happening than a return to club level. But I think it'd be a brilliant move. I think he would really help Portugal. He would give them the cutting edge. And, I think that even his style of play is really, really decent for, cup football, basically any sort of tournament setting where you have to effectively go through and play, knockouts and group stage games. I think he's spectacular for that because he's a very defensively oriented manager who will have a squad full of fantastic ballers who can, basically bail him out. And then he would just set up his defense to basically feed the rest of the team. Next most likely, or next kind of topic to consider, is any MLS club at 6-1 odds, 14% implied chance of happening. Um, I don't know. Mourinho is not gonna. He's not gonna manage in the MLS. I don't want him to. For his sake, for everyone's sake. The MLS is in a weird spot as a league. You know, Dean Smith is managing in the MLS. And you have a lot of kind of, it's not necessarily the highest skill ceiling compared to the other leagues. And for Mourinho to go to an MLS team right now, A, I don't know where he would go. B, would it, you know, would it satisfy him? I don't think so. I don't think he's the type of person that is going to look at the MLS as an exciting new opportunity. I think there's more chance he goes to Saudi. Nothing more else to add. 2 out of 10 likelihood and rating for me of happening. Next up is FC Porto at 7-1 odds, 12% chance of happening. I mean, this is, it's storybook. Him going back to Porto, him being, still in the Champions League, competing for the Liga Portugal. It's an enticing prospect. I think that there isn't necessarily he would have to basically be confident in his own kind of career to the point of being like, yep, I'm going to settle down. Because I think out of any sort of group of football fans, I think the Porto fans probably love Mourinho more than anybody. Yeah, I think they would, I think if he decided to come back, they'd roll out the red carpet, let him stay as long as he wanted, and if he so chose to retire there, they'd welcome it. I think he would he'd win the Portuguese league basically every year, I would imagine, or just about. If he didn't one year, I feel like it would be an anomaly. And beyond that, I think that it's not the most likely, but it does excite me. And I would give it like a 7 out of 10 rating for like how I would feel about it. Probably like 3 out of 10 likelihood of happening though, because, it's just, I don't think the money will be there. And that's really the biggest driving force in all things here. And finally, without, all the kind of sort of news that has to do with the possible prospects of Mourinho's next club, I figured I'd add some clubs or scenarios that could maybe provide some, some excitement for speculation in terms of where he might go. First club I want to talk about, or first, possible job I want to talk about for him being able to take on post Roma and for life post Roma is Chelsea. Chelsea, they have a 3-game winning streak right now. They're starting to click a bit more under Pochettino. Yeah, it still feels very disjointed. Squad feels kind of oddly thin despite how much money's been spent. And Chelsea, for the first time in a long time, at least from my perspective, I'm not, a Chelsea fan or anything, but from the outside looking in, it feels like there's a bit of an identity crisis at Stamford Bridge. And that isn't to say that I think Pochettino's a bad manager or that Chelsea's filled with, talentless sacks of flesh. Quite the opposite. I think Pochettino's a fine manager. I think Chelsea have some pretty great players in their club. I just think it's a really bad fit. I think it's like, you're putting Pochettino in the Lions then really at Stamford Bridge. And he just, I don't know, something about him. I think tactically he could probably, he's got the right, like, cut for the part. Stylistically, not so much. I think that he still lacks that kind of grit you would imagine out of a Chelsea manager. But since the club's been bought by Todd Bowley, it's felt this way. It's not just a Pochettino thing. And I think it's becoming, now that he's like really the sole manager after, a whole year of going through four of them. I think now he's kind of getting the brunt end of the force in terms of all the bad moves that Todd Bowley has made and the bad steps that Chelsea has taken in the last couple seasons or so. Um, so for me personally, I think Mourinho would, one, he would stabilize the club in some way. There's not like a ton of meaningful leadership at that club, and it's clear to see. Thiago Silva, he's an older player. He can only do so much in both performing on the pitch, but B, he's trying to connect with players who are, some of them are close to like 20 years younger than him. It's a whole different ball game, and I feel like there's these glaring holes from a administrative perspective that Mourinho would very easily kind of come in and, just based on his legacy at the club, his aura as a manager, his just legend status as an icon in football, I think he would get a far, 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 far better tune out of these players than Pochettino. I think Mourinho would have an absolute Goliath squad if he joined Chelsea again, because Bowley would not be afraid to spend. Mourinho would get who he wants, effectively for the most part. And beyond that, I think it would provide a bit more legitimacy to the whole project. Mourinho, love him or hate him, you could say anything you want about his tactics now, but he's a serial winner. He's one of the best managers of all time. Point blank, period. Pochettino struggled to win Ligue 1. That there's levels to this, and Mourinho elevates Chelsea. He elevates any club he joins, I think. Even still, despite, him not being that same man that was, running riot and just winning everything with Real Madrid, he is still an absolute legend. I think him going to Chelsea would be like a 9 out of 10 fit. It won't be perfect. It'll probably fizzle out after 2-3 years, but Pochettino will fizzle out before then anyways. So the way I see it is bring back a club legend, have him there to be able to bring in, they're going to be able to bring in the star power they need regardless, but to be able to bring in this kind of sense of unity, this sense of formality, sense of winning culture, really. And especially at Chelsea, a man who's done it before, a man who did it, left, came back, and did it again. Why not give him the prospect to go and do it a third time? As a Liverpool fan, I am totally fine with Chelsea just wallowing away and failing. That's what I'm here for as a rival fan. But Mourinho he's box office Premier League football. So I would love to see him back in the Premier League. I think Chelsea is the most likely destination, probably ahead of even Newcastle. Beyond that, other teams in the Premier League that might go in for Mourinho, I've seen links to West Ham, Wolves, and Crystal Palace. Quickly on all of them, West Ham, I don't know. West Ham are playing good football. I think West Ham has a squad that needs a lot of work, regardless of who's at the helm, especially if Mourinho is there, because Mourinho will want some better players, I would imagine, certain positions. I think he would make Jared Bowen so much of a higher level player. He would just elevate him in terms of everything. I think he'd turn into a proper superstar there. But I think it would still be kind of like a weird fit. I wouldn't be too upset if he went to West Ham though. Likelihood probably like 3 out of 10. Enjoyment factor probably like 8 out of 10 in terms of like being like, wow, that's kind of a weird move. Wolves, another side, Portuguese connection. Mourinho's agent, also Jorge Mendes, good connections to Wolves. So in a way, there's already an avenue there that has previously kind of been, used for transfers and for kind of establishing this kind of Portuguese uh, influence into Wolves. And as a result, I feel like Mourinho is really, he's the epitome of Portugal from a footballing sense, at least. Uh, so, you bring him in, and I think any Portuguese players there would listen to him like, they'd fight like warriors for him. And anyone else probably would do the same because, once again, Jose Mourinho. Likelihood of happening, I don't know, 2 out of 10. Uh, enjoyment factor, maybe like a 9 out of 10. I think it'd be really, really zany for him to go to Wolves. But I think he'd do fantastic and actually make them probably maybe not a Champions League contending side, but maybe trying to fight for Europa League or Conference League or something like that. Crystal Palace, I don't know. I don't see the fit really being all that great, even if he does go. Sure, he has Elise, sure, Eze is still there, but those guys are probably going out the door. Yeah, likelihood of happening 1 out of 10. Enjoyment factor 7 out of 10, maybe. It'd be cool to see him back at London, or in London, but at Crystal Palace, I don't think it'd be the best. And finally, the last possible kind of avenue that Jose Mourinho can go down. And I don't know if it's I think it might be my favorite because there's a chance it happens. But I doubt it happens. It's more of like a possibility and less of a probability that it happens. But that is Jose Mourinho taking over the wheel from Gareth Southgate at England. Well, that would be from top to bottom probably his best move. English national team, it's a change of scenery. He's in cup competition. He's in a cup competition. He's going up against, other sides. He's got arguably one of the most talented sides in the tournament with fantastic players. I mean, all the way through. Trent, Kane, Bellingham, Bukayo Saka, James Madison. The list goes on and on. There's so many quality players in the England setup, in the England squad. He would do bits. I think they'd win the Euros if they got Mourinho. I think Portugal might win the Euros if they get Mourinho regardless. I think anyone who gets him is probably closer to favorites than, being a dark horse. So for me, I think it'd be a fantastic move. I'm gonna say 4 out of 10 likelihood of happening. Southgate, I think this is kind of do or die for him if he fails at this Euros. Do you want him for 2026? No, you don't. You want somebody else, whoever that might be, God knows. But Mourinho's in a fortunate position now where, if he does even take on this job, he could be in a spot where he can just kind of sit back for a bit, not necessarily be painted out to be some madman all the time and hated on for. Honestly, he just gets needless hate. He is a legend of the sport. He gets disrespected. I hope he succeeds at his next job. He's still capable of winning silverware. I mean, he won the Europa League with Manchester United. Manchester United is not getting in a touching distance of the Europa League trophy, the Champions League trophy, maybe the Conference League, but they're not going to win that trophy for a few years minimum, bare minimum. It's going to be a while until they win it again. So that's just a testament to his quality. He did it at Roma. He's won every single European Cup competition on the club level. And why not try to get England the Euros, and win, the Continental Cup or the international stage as well with England. I mean, if I had to have him in any single setup, I think the most dramatic would be a return to Chelsea. I don't think it will happen, but it would be really crazy. Besides that, I'd prefer if he went to Portugal. Maybe. I mean, Portugal won the Euros recently, and Ronaldo already won it once, but I feel like the fit at Portugal probably is a bit more, there's a probably a bit closer of an affinity there. I think the England job would also be kind of like a nice chemistry for him. I think he would love it there. I would give the edge to Portugal. So if I had any choice for, I guess, most likely or most preferable, or what I think will be the most enjoyable route, my big three out of everything will be in this order: Chelsea, Portugal, England. So, yeah, that's all I have for you. I'll make sure to make a video whenever he gets signed to a new club or gets a new position with the national team. As always, if you enjoy the video, give the video a like, consider subscribing if you're new. Make sure to comment down below with your thoughts on basically everything I've gone over in this video on Jose Mourinho, his sacking, and where he might go next. Thank you so much for watching. Hope you enjoyed. I'm Sideline Sedo. Peace.